checking them out. It's gonna be a little different one here today. We're going into how we got here. You know, where do I get off to talk? All right, let's go. We're going to dive deep here. Pretty much about what happens when you jump out of a car window. I'll explain that to you in just a little bit, what that means. But we got some good advice. I think it's good advice, and I think it's the right thing to do in order for us to have some credibility here. And also, I guess, to philosophize on ourselves and, learn about more of who we are inside and what makes us who we are. And, how I became who I became now, and how I got sales kind of answered that for me. And I think we're going to go way back to my childhood here. So I'm going to start with telling you what happens when you jump out of a car window. Not really funny, being like 4 or 5 years old, leaping out of a Hyundai Elantra doing 40 miles an hour. You do find out, because for a split second you think that your feet are going to land and you could just run. But as the ground approaches and you hit it and your body gets there and starts tumbling, it's a whole different ballpark. I did that a few times in my life, jumping out of a car window. I know it sounds crazy. I'm going to explain to you kind of why that happened. My father, rest his soul, was a little bit of a different person, I think you would say. These reasons why I leapt out the car window, they're all going to kind of come full circle here. Is there was times we'd be going places and I'm a kid just talking to my dad in the car. And I guess maybe from him being hungover or, on some substances or something, he didn't want to hear from his child. So, he would start to swing it on me, and while we're driving. And, rather than stay there with him, I guess at that time thought it was safer to jump out of a car window. And I did that 2 or 3 times in my younger days. It's a weird thing to be putting yourself in, because you're jumping out of a window, you're putting yourself in more danger and risk of death, and in order to feel safe. Or is it safer to jump out the window than to stay in the car? It's a weird thing to wrap your head around. These kind of things happen to me from an early age, and it's messed up, because as bad as the times I wanted to get away from my father, I can remember being a young boy and just wanting my dad around. Wanting my dad to play with me, to watch me, play sports or catch balls or throw a ball to me, or run with me, do something. And there was times I wanted that as a child, and then the other times where you got to jump out of a car window. I mean, that's just kind of simple how it gets. But how do you come to terms with that duality in your mind? You're wanting safety, but thinking it's normal to be in bad situations isn't. I don't think that's normal at all. Other things happened. I as growing up, my father was a police officer, but he was also into some other things, selling drugs, doing drugs, things like that. And I remember a bunch of wild times. He used to leave me, in the projects as collateral when he would go, be picking up large quantities of cocaine and stuff in the 80s and early 90s, I guess. To think of that with my children, like doing that to my son, leaving him there with drug runners from Peru or whatever it was, and they had pictures of me like wearing sombreros with them and hats, like and as you're a kid, you think these guys are your dad's friends and they're your peers. Then you start realizing what's going on, when he gets arrested, and you start putting the dots together, and just how dark that was. At least to me, it was dark. Um, those are the moments I remember with my dad. I don't remember playing baseball or him playing basketball or showing me how to ride a bike or anything to read, whatever. Um, but again, it's that duality. I wanted a dad, and those are the times I got to be with him. I thought it was cool at the time, but on those same days would be days you'd want to run away. You know, um, just wild things. Him being a police officer, I remember. Uh, he brought me into the precinct and down to where the guys in jail were and things like that. And one of the guys, I guess my father arrested, grabbed me through the bars and smashing my head and choking me. And I remember my father swinging through punching through the gap in the bars to get the guy off me. And, my head being all swelled up and things like that. And again, weird. Like I thought it was my hero that day, but put me in harm's way, as I got older. But why put me there to begin with? That's just the crazy thing. So these are all, while I'm developing as a young man, a young child, these are all things that are, going on around me in my head. And like, after he got injured on the job, he started bartending, down the street from our house, or, a couple miles from our house. And I used to get off the school bus there. And just be, playing shuffleboard and like, things like that while they're drinking and partying, 2, 3 in the afternoon, and there all the time. And a couple times I got off the bus and wasn't there, just was out partying or drinking somewhere else or doing something. And I remember I was 5 years old at the time and having to walk and, being scared. And then one of the neighbors picked me up. And because I was so scared as a child, I remember slamming my hand in the door when I got in the car with the neighbor to get home, and things like that. And it also, he also, because I guess it's because you want to relate to your dad or be around your father, be a peer with him. I guess one of the only ways I would bond with him, or it would be like him giving me sips of alcohol at 5, 8, 10 years old, and as I got to like 12, then he's buying me beers, and when you're that age, you think you're the cool kid, and my dad got me beer, and you can hang out with your buddies and like drink, and you were like a hero to them, and like, but not realizing how crazy that is. The times. School nights, bringing weird people to the house and parties and music going on, and like him putting me to bed and just the smell of the alcohol on him. And like, I just remember it smelled sweet, but it like disgusted me. It always made me sick to my stomach. Just wild things. But again, this whole time, I just want to I want a dad, man. I wanted a dad. And those are the moments that I remember with my father. And I can only imagine, like, I don't want my son thinking that, going through that. And just the risks, just the crazy risks being put in. Another time, like, finding a bag of Coke in his bedroom, and I was probably like 7, 8 years old, and I'm eating it and going crazy. My mother comes in, and it's all this madness, and and just things like that the whole time. And the thing that's probably like, yeah, these are shitty stories or whatever, but the thing that's the worst part about it is probably the way he talked to me. the conversations, they always had distance. Like, I was an annoyance. I was a burden to him. He never really look at me in the eye. Very, very few and far between. Um, just those weird things. And I guess as you're developing as a young man, these are the examples that get set in your brain. Um, just this leads on to, these things stay with you until you get to adulthood. Um, I mean, I pretty much cleansed them all out, but they're still there. And this is the kind of family. So it's wild. I remember my mother being gone one time, and I was probably like 9 or 10 at this point, 10 or 11. And he was supposed to watch me, and he wanted to go out after I got home from school. And he was yelling at me, "You got to stay here, you got to do this." And I said, "No, I want to come. I want to come with you." And then, I finally got the, at least I thought I was, man enough to, to say "fuck you" to him. And the second I did that, um, he's a big grown man. He's a bigger man than me, but he punched me, knocked me out, and left me on the floor, laying in front of the sliding glass door, out cold. I remember I didn't even cry because I woke up, I don't know, 10 minutes later to 30 minutes later. I don't even know the time. Just to the sun shining on my face, the warm sun coming through the sliding glass door. And then he's nowhere to be found, by myself again. Just things like that. So eventually, parents split and things like that. But in between, I guess because I wasn't getting it from my father, I would look at, some of my friends' dads, I guess, to fill the gap. But I could tell they loved me. But there was always a quiet distance, I guess you'd say, because, I'm not theirs. But some tried, and it was helpful. Some of these men, like Tony, Bob Droz, Al Foy, Lee Bones, even him. He always had a door for me to stay in. Those guys kind of became like second dads to me, and yeah, they, I know they cared for me, and they taught me certain things, and they showed me certain things. Like I think I picked up little pieces from each of them, about like parts of being a good man and a good dad. But it's hard when you're somebody else's kid, man. But I'm thankful for them, and I think having them, just that little bit of input, especially probably from Tony, who's probably the biggest influence there. Played with us. Always kept me under his wing, took me to church. I call him Pops to this day. If I ever needed anything, and he was. Funny thing is he was in the car business, and when I first got in, I called him to to help me get recommendations and things like that, and he looked out for me. And to this day, I still call him Pops, and I'm thankful for that. So again, not to go backwards, but like I said, father giving me drinks, and you're going through high school, so you start drinking, you're doing drugs, and somewhere along the line, when you go down that path, everything that's good like leaves you. Your sports leave you. The healthy friendships leave you. Your schoolwork. I was always in honors classes throughout all this crazy, like Learning Unlimited, which was like a special kids thing, and like honors classes. I was always, I guess, ahead of the curve and intelligence wise, but I think a lot of that got masked just because who I hung out with and who I was becoming. And then at that point, especially in your teenage years, the pain, the hurt, it's embedded in you, almost for life. You can lessen its impact on you. But it's always there. But in a weird way, I had to I think that's what I'm doing now is I'm inverting it. I'm breaking I'm breaking that curse, man. So moving forward, all this is going on, and I'm starting to get into my, early adulthood, and start working. But you're working at that point to go out and drink and party, and years go by, and you're almost on autopilot the whole time. you know, um, but again, finding my way into the car business, I did gain sales skills. I had some natural talent. And the crazy part is I think I got better because a lot of it was out of desperation, and also looking for validation. So I became, I would spend all my money. I would need to pay things and pay people, and it almost happened out of necessity that I had to get better, like a weird way. So it's like and at this point in your life, you're balancing between, feeling worthless or feeling like you're somebody. And this is kind of, it takes years, but this is kind of where like the switch started to happen in me. So, in order to keep my lifestyle going, I got really good at grossing on cars. And, we're going to do that, lesson for you guys. But I did it to feed the habits of my lifestyle, along with the competitive spirit, because I always wanted to win. I always wanted to be the best. And I don't know if that's because of, in fact, I know it's because of the childhood and the wanting recognition from, the first man in my life, which is my father, which I never got. So I guess my ego, I was, making it up in two different ways, so, the spirit to win, and growing and still being torn in two different directions, party, hurt person, and the winner and the wanting to succeed. These two guys were living inside me at one time, and you're trying to, at the same time, trying to find, peers and women, but the whole time you're carrying that loneliness, I guess the broken trust from my father and my mother. I couldn't trust anyone. So, and I lied sometimes to avoid who I was at the time. The good soul in me wanted to help, but the competition over the lifestyle, it's impossible to balance. I couldn't trust my mother, like, even to this day, it's hard. Like, any secrets, I'm sick, I had, something wrong with my balls, and, telling the neighbors, or I was upset about something, or I cried about my dad, my cousins would know, my aunts would know, the neighbors would know. And as you're a kid, you got no safe place there. And I think I kind of built a wall around me, and I tried to build the wall higher, to compensate for, try to make myself big on the outside, what do you call it? Like, bravado wise, when I was really, small hurt child inside, and at that point, when those things are going on, you can't trust your mother, you can't trust your father, the other, friends you can't trust because, don't do this, don't say that. And then, everybody does it. You end up being alone, more alone. And the crazy part is me, if anybody who knows me, I always wanted to look out for people. I didn't like the bullies picking on kids. I would always try to help my friends, give them advice, give them free stuff, give them a place to stay, give them clothes, hang out with them and talk to them when they were hurt, and, try to get them to read more and try to get them to expand their lives and handle their relationships better. Meanwhile, again, the duality of the other side of me is doing something else. But I always wanted, to look out for these people, but the ones I wanted it back from, it never came. I think Theo Vaughn says it best. It's not that, I don't have anybody's back, but it's that, nobody has me, you know what I mean? Which I think was a very good point, and not even from my own blood. And my wife to this day is like amazed that I kept my soul intact through all the years of this, stuff going on. it's crazy. So in a way that the in sales and excelling in sales, it's where I found my purpose and my value in myself, just the respect I wanted from, the older guys in the neighborhood, my father, especially, my other peers. That never came until I got into the sales world. Because for the first time when I got really good, you know, I got really good, I'm in my 20s, but 45, 50-year-old managers have been in the business forever, start respecting me and asking me for advice and letting me, change habits of the dealership. And I show them things. And, I finally got maybe the respect and admiration I was looking for by excelling in the sales world. I was always confident in life. Uh, but the mistrust of myself and my intentions sometimes is what kept me from being 100%. So like since high school, chasing women and trying to fulfill the emptiness, I guess, inside me by racking up my numbers, the quantity of women, rather than the quality in most cases. It would give me a false sense of self-esteem and worth, and yet at the same time, um, it would give me respect and clout from the other males I was around, or sometimes on the other hand, it would make them envious. The crazy thing is you can't win one way or the other, and I didn't even like living it, even though as a male, your ego, you're trying to you know make yourself again seem bigger or whatever it is. And the wild thing is as I'm doing this again, the duality of myself is, I'd be with women. I wouldn't really kiss and tell. I didn't like the thought of disrespecting the women I slept with, like other guys around me where they brag, they boast. I hated when they talked like that. I hated when they, badmouth the woman or, said, oh, I did this, I hooked up with her. I didn't like that at all. So I didn't like that around me. That they'd brag, and that just wasn't me. In fact, the crazy thing is, women talk to other women about how I never said anything, and then other women would, you know, come to hang out with me. So, and then the other times that people did find out, it was the chick assuming I was like the other guys bragging, and they would, blow up their own spot. It was crazy. But I was selfish, and I used my charm to gain the favor of them, and other times so I could have a roof over my head. It went on to some of my older years there, and I did all that, and just to continue my partying and to avoid being who I knew I was deep down inside. It's almost scary when you start to come to the terms that you know who you are inside, but the person you've been living as for a long time um, feels so much stronger than the person you are in your soul. And I think that's where you gotta like that's where the real battle is putting down you know the one that you think is the thing that's going to make you powerful, respected, a man like that, and macho. It's not that. It's the being good and kind natured. It's putting that side of you to bed. And I wanted it to go to the bed since I was 13. I knew it then. I knew it in the back of my mind then. I knew it in the front of my mind then sometimes too. But you just kind of get on a wheel and you're just moving on a wheel. And the crazy thing is that some of the women I was with, I love them. Very few, but I love them, But I think, the last one or two um, is what enabled me to get to be. I started to learn what a relationship was like, and I started to learn responsibility, but I was still pulled on two sides, drinking and all that stuff. And, but I started to see when I was living with this one woman, and her daughter, who would reach out to me and then, look out to me. And I wanted to take care of her and protect her. I started to realize my purpose as a man. Now, it took me a couple of years to figure it out. I did not handle that relationship well, but I think that was the one that really pushed me the most towards who I'm becoming now, even though I hurt people along the way. Um, I didn't want to hurt anybody. Um, but I ended up hurting myself the most because I realized I was becoming something I hated. I didn't like to see a woman cry or do things like that. And I was the guy that um, was doing that to them. And that sucked. I hated that guy. I hate that guy. I'm glad I'm not that guy anymore. I'm happy where God brought me here now to be able to, not that you can ever make it all right, but to not put that poison, that feelings that I had, into my children. So even today, um, I was almost brought to tears. My son and my daughter are down here working out with me, and my son, he's running back and forth. He's 3, and he's going, "Dad, look at me, I'm fast. Dad, look at me, look how fast I am." And I remember being 3 and asking my dad to, "Hey, look at me," and it never happened. And as he asked me that, I said, "Man, this is a moment. I'm gonna pay attention to him." Dropped everything I'm doing, pay attention to him, and then I start running around with him and my daughter together. And it was kind of like I knew I was breaking something. I knew I was breaking the devil's grasp on this family, or grasp on my soul, because God gave me the opportunity to do the thing that I wanted as a boy for my son. And I hope I can do more of it. Carrying work and everything in between, it's tough, but I hope I can do more of it. It really, you know, hit home to me. Um, you know, it's just crazy. Because for years even the women I was with or friends, I would never let anybody get too close, so they could hurt me. And but the crazy part is, like I said, I end up hurting myself, and I hurt them, and they scar my soul more, and I become, pain to them. And that's the thing I don't want. I didn't ever want it to do that. I became the same pain I hated, but somehow God and goodness always had a home in me, and I just had to let it, I just had to be brave. I had to man up and take responsibility for it all, and just, just move forward. Um, you know, the things I carried and was passing on, I carried and was passing on generational darkness to other women and other people. And I don't want that for my kids. I don't want to push it on them, man. I don't want that. I remember what it was like as a child. I remember there, and even more times. I remember. And if I could avoid that for my children at any cost, if I could pay a little bit more attention to them, if I could give them a little more love, if I could watch them run. Look at me, Dad. Look how fast I am, Dad. I'm going to be fast, Dad. You want to race me, Dad? You want to run, Dad? The greatest moment of my life. Seriously. So, I couldn't stand myself for who I was. But I thank God my long lost love came back into my life. My kids came, and then blam, the vision became clearer. I finally had the balls enough to step forward and leave behind the guy I thought was the tough guy, the guy I thought was a man, all those false images that you have in your brain of that's a man. That's what a man does. That's how a man acts. No, man, that's all nonsense. That's boy stuff. That's little boys without dad stuff. And, I'm going to be the example for my children. So that vision, became real clear to me. To look in my kid's eyes today, and it flashed me back to that little boy that was in me. And, but I had to, have that realization. I had to set it free, man. And in a way now I'm proud of myself now. And I want to continue to do that, because before, how I was living, before marriage and my wife, and really focusing on, really being a man, and, leaning on God and all that, I didn't really know, for sure who I even was. Again, I wasn't a man, and I don't even know what that really meant. Like I said before, I know what it means now. I know what it means now. It's all clear now. You know, and the inner me, like we were talking about, eventually seeped its way to the outside of me, and that's the guy you got now. Now I want to do this podcast because I want to help young men, who go through similar situations, be it worse or be it less bad, or if there's even a scale to that, to know that voice that's inside them, that's there saying, man, this isn't you and your soul. Don't act this way. Don't sell drugs. Don't go beat up some guy. Don't shoot somebody. Don't rob a store. Don't do that. Be brave enough, even if everyone around you is going to tell you that's not how you're supposed to act. They're going to tell you you're a coward. The real coward is being a sheep with the rest of them. Acting like a bad boy, being violent, and living dangerously. It's hard. It's hard. And on top of that, while I'm going through all this mental nonsense and having my kids, I'm fat. Now I just had my kids a couple years ago. I'm fat. My skin's bad. My eyes are bad. My guts are bad. My heart's bad. My blood pressure's through the roof. My bones are bad. My penis is bad. My attitude's bad. I'm never well rested. My drive is bad. I was becoming the personification of sin, a glutton. And I had just had my children, and it was crazy. It was crazy. Because if you looked at me on the outside, it looked like I was calling it quits, but I was just getting into my full awakening. I thought at one point, maybe I would just drink myself to death or do something, a couple of years before, I got back with my wife, and I was just, I was a garbage human at the time. And then at the last second, as I'm starting to lean towards doing it by myself, clearing my mind, acting on my own by myself, bam, God drops my wife, the love of my life, who I met when I was 7 years. She was 7 years old. I was 9 years old. And the first thing she ever said to me was, "I'm going to marry you." And, she was the only woman in my life that, I didn't date until we got older, because, again, talking about the kind of guy I was before, chasing women, doing all that. I knew in my heart, I knew in my soul, I never wanted to hurt her. So I didn't date her because I knew I was going to cheat on her. I know that sounds crazy. It's just wacky. But, yeah, that's what I did. And then thank God, she's back in my life, and now it's a total inversion of everything I was before. Looking in my kids' eyes, and I had a chance to, keep their spirit and their soul cleaner than the one I was, given, that was maliciously infected by the world and, my childhood. I get to come back around. So, so full circle here. Maybe God was prepping me for something greater, to have the realization that I'm having now. And, I just want to, I just hate to think that my growth was at the expense of others. And I'm sorry for that. Jesus, forgive me. And the only way I could justify it is if he was prepping me and using me. And, maybe that's a grandiose ego, protecting itself. But going back, I now wonder, maybe this is the only way I can look at it, is to ask for forgiveness and try to live righteously as best I can. And and break the curse and break the hurt, at least as much as I can, from going into my kids. And maybe that'll let them not do it to their kids, and maybe slowly it'll weigh the scales of justice and the scales of piety and love to outweigh the evil and the ignorance and the darkness and the running away that's in the world. But you know, just to go back to the beginning with my dad, going back, I wonder why he couldn't stand to look at me at the time. And maybe it's because maybe he saw w- the man that's here now in the eyes of that child, and, maybe that's why he avoided me for years, not talking to me for, maybe once or twice in the last decade he was alive, hanging up the phone on me. And, um, you know, he never called, he never visited, even when he lived down the street. And, you know, uh, and when I did get the chance to even talk to him, he wouldn't listen. He had no respect for me. So, and my mother, same thing, no respect for me. So again, that's maybe the full circle back to the car roll. But, maybe I found, you know, uh, part of my longing to be even heard or respected by anyone. But in the sales world, again, that's kind of where I found it. The older peers, the owners of the businesses, the managers, they respected me and my abilities, my input, my ideas. I've had dealerships change the whole way they ran their process. One of them was running a Cardone style, and I just took them back through another way, though they didn't properly train or implement it. That's what we're going to do with our training videos. I'm going to show you all that stuff. What they weren't was ideal, and mix that, with a need or, money, and somehow it became the perfect storm, I set out to be more than I could be, and then I took it very seriously, the art of sales, and emboldened the pursuit, to win, because I just part of that competitive, I want to win, but that was in there. And I think that part of wanting to win is what really put the last straw on the camel's back here. Because when I had to wait and, my kids were just born and I got some scans done, I was, 350 pounds. I'll show you some pictures here. I mean, look at this guy. Huge, massive, massive. And then now, 2 years later, 18 months later, this is what we have here. This, and we're working to get better. We got this, and then that's what we're working towards. But that laying in that bed when I thought I had liver cancer, my wife is crying, my kids are only a couple months old, and she's looking at me like, "What are we going to do without you? Something's got to give." That was the last straw that fully flipped my switch to go the route I'm going now, to get to where this podcast is coming from. I had this idea and this dream 10 years ago, but I wasn't ready for it yet. I wasn't as focused. I wasn't as driven. I didn't have purpose. But after that, and like looking at my kids, my wife's crying, I'm not going to be here because what? I'm a glutton because I killed myself because I was, I was lonely and, I was hurt as a child and I'm going to let that continue and woe is me nonsense. No, man. Nah, fuck that. Nope. That was the last straw. Bip, back broken. Here it is. That camel ain't walking no more. Now I'm picking up. I'm going to my oasis. That's where we're going. So, and along now my perspective is, tell the story, carry on to others, help others, build something out of this. So that's what my wife said to do today, was to expand on, the terrible person I was and why I'm doing this now. To, I don't know if you could ever make amends, but I feel like I would be doing the world an injustice if I didn't try to bring some good back into it, bring some joy back into it, just like when my son says, "Look at me, Dad, I'm racing." There's some other guys like the men I mentioned earlier that were, secondary fathers to me. Maybe I can put some advice into them and save them a little bit and help them have the courage to let the good person inside them out and shun that person that, the world tells them is the man. And that's why we're doing this. We're going to expand some more here. I'm going to have some other guests on. We're going to really start taking this to the level. So I'm considering it. And thank God to my wife that this is the reset. This is the reset episode. Episode 4, the reset. We've gone through the 4 seasons now. Now we're mapping a new chart. Now we're heading north. We're going up, baby. So it's the PMoon podcast. I thank you for listening. And just like always, let's get some music here, pal. Oh, yes, it is, baby. Come on. So let's go. Let's start to build this. And now you know why. Now you know why. Now you know how we got here. So let's go, baby. Episode 4 in the books. Let's do it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. 4 in the books. Episode 4. And you didn't notice we got stars in the background now. The stars shining. Yeah, we got some more glimmer happening here. Thank you all. God bless. May Jesus be with you. And I'll see you at episode 5. Thanks, guys.